My presentation is on fear, suspense, and immersion in literature, with my thesis being, in order for fear in literature to be effective, it must be preceded by suspense. I actually put my works, never mind, my presentation has ended.
You're on my email.
What's this about the president messaging?
I can't
Oh.
see. Here we go. Is your works cited first?
Yes.
Hey.
Yeah.
I'll go back.
Sorry. I'm very excited for this part.
Okay. Oh boy. Sorry, no spoilers.
How do I, where's the, there we go. Hi, bud.
Yeah, there you go. Turn it that way. You're good.
All right.
Okay.
So for this presentation, I actually put my work cited at the beginning because I think it makes more sense for us all to start with like the same amount of information so you can see where I'm coming from. For my first source, I've got Suspense by Donald Beecher. This was my Google Scholar article, and this is an article that goes in depth about suspense's role not only in literature, but on the human psyche. He basically tries to explain how we are affected by the things we read, and I'm gonna be using excerpts from the first paragraph of that and the fourth. Next is a TED Ed video called How to Make Your Writing Suspenseful by Victoria Smith. This video talks a lot about how to draw out time in your writing and how to make your readers sort of feel that anticipation. And she actually talks a lot about how fear can be related to that. I'm not going to be showing clips from this, but I will put the timestamps and direct quotes from it. And for my final source, Five Nights at Freddy's, The Silver Eyes by Scott Cawthon. I will be using this as my literary example of fear in literature being preceded by suspense. So first off, what is suspense? As described by Donald Beecher, a suspenseful situation is one in which the outcome is uncertain and readers are concerned with how they will be resolved, or a situation in which the outcome is inevitable and readers, in their fear, concentrate merely on knowing when the catastrophe will be complete. Beecher also goes on to say that literary suspense entails liked characters under duress whose futures are perilous and uncertain, futures about which readers hold strong preferences. So with these excerpts, it's very clear that suspense, in order for it to work, needs both time and characters that you actually care about, stakes that matter. How can a writer create suspense, and why should they? Suspense can bring readers closer into the story, leaving them susceptible to fearful events. It's just the same as any other story. If you get immersed in something, you're going to feel more vulnerable and more, open to feel those emotions. In How to Make Your Writing Suspenseful by Victoria Smith, she recounts that horror writers harness that fear not by revealing horrors, but by leaving the audience hanging in anticipation of them, showing that sometimes a lack of answers is actually going to be better for your writing. She also says that the key to suspense is to set up a question, or several, that the audience hopes to get the answer to. However, she believes that creating a fear of said answer actually arriving is what's going to make them the most, locked in and immersed. The Silver Eyes, prime examples of suspense. In Five Nights at Freddy's, The Silver Eyes by Scott Cawthon and Kira Breed Risley, successful examples of fear are always preceded and supplemented by suspense. So for this first excerpt, there's a scene in which he knew the suit he was wearing was still only one flinch, one startled jump from killing him. As the voice spoke, Carlton began to weep, using all his will to keep his body from shaking. This is an excerpt of a chapter in which he's trapped inside of a suit that if he moves, the metal parts will close in on him and kill him. Yeah, I can see Zirkin's face. And it's a scary thing. What?
Why would you read this?
Why not?
So what's interesting about this quote is that in and of itself, it's already pretty unsettling. But you have information here that was introduced previously in the novel, such as how the suit functions, and you have this drawn out example. Obviously, I can't put the whole chapter in this, but I think this excerpt shows the sort of tense feeling the reader's supposed to have, because they know with this quote, with the using all his will to keep his body from shaking, at any moment things could go south for this character that we care about. Charlie froze. The shuffling thing did not move. For what felt like an age, Charlie held her breath. He heard. He must have heard. But the animatronic still made no sound. Charlie held still and listened, waiting for another sound of movement to mask her own. Her breathing seemed louder than before. The shuffling sound resumed, and now, without warning, it was directly in front of her. This is from a separate chapter. Zirkin's like at the edge of her seat right now. This
I
is
don't
awesome.
like horror. I'm not a fan.
Oh, well, would you say that you are anticipating an answer?
That was really
Thank you. But anyways, this is another chapter with a completely separate character after we've already seen horrible things happen in the first. So by establishing these things and giving us a lot of time to process them, as well as giving us a lack of information, the author is able to sort of surprise the reader and keep them immersed. Now, you might say that fear could be created without suspense, but there's actually several instances where that's not the case. In literature, suspense can be created without fear, but fear cannot be created without suspense. In a will they, won't they novel, there's suspense in the sense that you don't know what's going to happen. As described earlier, suspense is just when you want to know the answers. But fear cannot be created without suspense. It's like a square's rectangle. It's not. As described by suspense, fear needs to build in order for it to be effective, which directly correlates with suspense's building nature. Immersing a reader in any story, like the example I already gave, takes time, and the same is true of horror novels. Carlton entered the room, and suddenly the man was before him. This is an excerpt from the novel that I previously mentioned, and I chose this excerpt for this slide because I feel like the novel, while it has so many examples of great horror and suspense, there's a lot of examples in which the horror kind of falls flat, and it's examples like this in which I'm not taking this out of context. I'm not saying, oh, I should have put the whole chapter. There's no suspense to this moment. It just drops on you immediately, and you don't feel scared or nervous. Zirkin's got a blank face right now, and it's not fun or scary. So in conclusion, a suspenseful situation is one in which the outcome is uncertain and readers are concerned with how they will be resolved, or a situation in which the outcome is inevitable and readers, in their fear, concentrate merely on knowing when the catastrophe will be complete. Excerpts from Suspense and How to Make Your Writing Suspenseful show that suspense takes two things: a lack of information and an abundance of time. There are several examples of horror being created successfully in Five Nights at Freddy's: The Silver Eyes, and each is preceded by suspense. In the few instances where horror is created unsuccessfully, the element of suspense is conspicuously absent. In order for fear in literature to be effective, it must be preceded by suspense. Thank you.
I think the time thing is a good thing.